Hi, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us again for this episode of TomTalks. I'm Hope with the One World, One Water Center, and I am joined with Brooke Daley from Executive Events, a local events planning company. Without further ado, we're going to jump right in and talk about event sustainability.
Thank you, Hope. Hi, everybody. So happy to be here. My name is Brooke Daley. I have been working for this company for 8 years, which is crazy. And I've been planning events around the world from 50 people to 13,000 people. So large range of events. And in the last probably 5 years, I have been diving in and learning as much as I can about the sustainable event world. Events are not the most sustainable industry. As you can imagine, gathering tons of people for just a very short amount of time in a space can take up a lot of energy, it uses a lot of resources, but there are some really awesome things out there that we've learned about. So I have a little presentation about event sustainability, and I'll make a side note. This really does pertain to in-person events, and we obviously have gone virtual due to the pandemic. And so one thing to keep in mind is that some of the things that I'm going to share might not be as easy to accomplish with going back in person with the new guidelines and restrictions due to COVID. So I'll touch on those as I go through and kind of make note of some things that we're going a little backwards on when it comes to sustainability, but I do believe that we'll get back there. So without further ado, I'm going to start with a little true and false because I think some people don't realize, like I said, that events are not that sustainable. So let's go through some facts, and then I'm going to go through kind of some solutions and some really cool things that we've learned about how to make events greener. So a little true and false. Here we go. First one is the hospitality industry in the US wastes 5 million tons of food a year. And this is actually false. That wastes 25 million tons of food annually, which is a really shocking number, but that's the reality of the situation we live in. Like I said, you're gathering lots of people together for a little amount of time. There's a lot of food that gets ordered for these events, and sadly, a lot of it does go to waste. Another fact, true or false, millennials care about the environment and are willing to make financial sacrifices to improve our planet. And believe it or not, this is actually true, which is really good for us. We have shown that 68% of millennials are willing to actually spend more money on products and services that are better for the environment. So when you're looking at your events and some things might come at a higher cost, if you're showing your attendees that this is actually at a higher cost due to it being more sustainable, people are willing to spend that money, even our younger generations. So that's kind of a fun fact. True or false? In addition to recycling, compost is the most effective method for combating food waste. And this is actually false. In the events industry, the two most important aspects of reducing food waste are source reduction and food donation. So source reduction, we're talking about really trying to order the correct amount so you're serving less, which means you're prepping less food and sourcing locally. Sure, you guys have heard this all tons before, but order from the actual area you're at instead of ordering items that are coming from overseas or from other areas. There's a huge carbon footprint when we don't actually source our products locally. And then food donation, which I'll kind of go into a little bit here. So due to liability issues, most city and county health departments do not allow leftover food from events to be donated to food banks. And this is actually false, which is great news. So back in 1996, there actually was a food donation act signed by Bill Clinton that says that leftover food can be distributed as long as it's going to a nonprofit. So really make sure you're talking to your venues, and I do this with all the venues I source. Do you have a food donation partner? Who is it, and what does that look like? Like I mentioned, some things are changing due to the pandemic, and unfortunately, the amount and the restrictions of food donation is changing, and the hotels and different convention centers and venues are really trying to work with health professionals and the CDC on guidelines of food donation because we do not want this to go away. So another little fact, true or false, freight and shipping cause the largest carbon footprint for large events. And this is also false. The number one kicker for the carbon footprint is air travel by attendees to and from. So, as you know, conferences are happening all over the world, and they're usually at a location where not everyone is located. And that's the perk of it, work perks. You get to go travel to San Francisco or London or Austin or to these cool cities for your conference, which is exciting and great. But unfortunately, that air travel to and from attendees going from where they're located to the event is 70% of the carbon footprint of events. So obviously, with everything going virtual this year, we've seen a major decrease in this. And one of the silver linings, I will say, of the pandemic is some of the positive effects it's had on the environment, including air travel. So just something to kind of keep in mind. I have seen some of my clients do kind of a discount on the event registration costs if you decide to take a car or do something that's more sustainable. And of course, now that we've all learned the realm of virtual events and the virtual event world this year, and that it is successful, offering a virtual component to your event can also help minimize that air travel. A couple things that we can do. So my team and I here at Executive Events, we've brainstormed, we've worked with so many different vast realms of clients, and these are just a couple things that we've thought of that are really simple and really easy and don't actually have a huge financial constraint on your budget, because it's all about budget for events, right? What can we afford? What can we do? So something that's really simple: recyclable badge holders and lanyards. You go to conferences, you see everyone wearing these badges. After the conference ends, the badges get thrown in the trash. So spending maybe a couple extra dollars, and really there's very affordable companies out there now that do recyclable materials for badges. Putting the investment into that, I mean, that right there is a huge waste that you can eliminate. Also eliminating the swag. I know that we all love our free t-shirts and bags and little like stress balls when you go to the conferences, but a lot of this is just going to waste or getting thrown away. And so really talking to your attendee base and your client, what do we really need? What can we actually make electronic, and what's actually going to work to really eliminate this extra stuff? And if you do have to have the swag, work with sustainable companies. There's a ton out there. Digital signage. You go into an event and what do you see? You see big paperboard signs that have the year printed all over them. In my head, I walk in, I'm like, these are never gonna be able to be used again. And of course, every year comes with different branding. So marketing is huge for these events. We don't want that to go away. But there are so many companies out there now that are offering digital signage, which actually looks a lot cooler. It's very sustainable. And the greatest part about it is that you're not having to deal with deadlines of getting to the printer. I think it's the way of the future for events. And essentially the only equipment you're having to use are monitors that you're renting from a company, then they're getting reused for other events. Another thing to eliminate paper is mobile apps. Let's get rid of paper programs. Everyone's got a smartphone now. Let's push mobile apps instead of the paper printed thick, 20-page programs. Meatless Monday. We saw this at an event that I attended. It was an event for event planners, and they had their largest banquet all vegetarian for, I think it was 5,000 people, and it was a hit. So let's keep pushing that. Production of meat is a huge waste of water, carbon, energy. There's just a lot of downsides to meat production, and when you're producing it in really large quantities for 5,000 people, you can do the math of how much this is affecting the environment. This is one that is changing in 2021 because of the pandemic, but choosing reusable flatware, glassware, cloth napkins, etc. This was something I really try to do at a lot of my events. No one-time use plastics or paper napkins, using ceramic bowls and plates. And you're going to have more things to wash, but it's not that one-time use plastic. Unfortunately, with COVID, a lot of venues are not allowing this anymore just because it has, health violations. The good news is there are so many companies out there with recyclable and compostable products. So that's a new avenue to explore in the hybrid world. And when we go back in person, recycling compostable bins, making sure these are visible and abundant. Venues have tons of them. Let's just put them everywhere. Make sure people aren't putting, recycling in the trash and vice versa. Let's put things in the right place. Let's make it abundant. Let's make it clear. Signage is everything. And then another thing that was great pre-pandemic is using water bubblers, and maybe your attendee gift, or there's an option for attendees to buy a reusable water bottle, and that's what they use to do water refills, and it's not plastic one-use water bottles. Unfortunately, right now with pandemic happening, a lot of venues are not allowing water bubblers or water fountains. So going backwards to single use plastic or glass bottles is not ideal. But again, we're in a weird time right now. So hopefully when things are back to normal, we're back to using these more sustainable options. So these are just a couple things to think of, a couple other items when it comes to your venue. And these are just, again, just throwing things out there that we've thought about. There are venue certifications to be a green venue, making sure the places you're working with, the locations that you're working with, follow any of these certifications. So LEED, Apex, ASTM, these are all great things to check for. Something really simple, do they stock linenless tables? The linens, it seems like it's really sustainable, but the washing and the drying and the dry cleaning of this, the energy and the water waste with linens is actually huge. So can we actually just have our tables not have linens on them? Whoever thought that could remove a lot of waste. And then if you are going to have linens, is the provider individually wrapping them in plastic? If so, can we ask that they don't do this, or that they bulk wrap them if they have to for health reasons? So little things like this to think about. Minimizing your energy on move in and move out days. So when attendees aren't actually in, do we have to have the heat or the energy or the AC on? So can these things be eliminated when it's just kind of move in and set up days? Again, that's a whole 24, 48 hours, depending how many days you're setting up, where you don't need to be using that much energy. And then how does your kitchen handle food waste, frying oil, compostables, recyclables? We went through this donation, making sure that they have a donation partner and just really minimize food waste. Because as we saw at the beginning, 250 million pounds a year or tons a year is a lot. All right, so we can actually build this into our contracts. So when you're looking at contracting a venue and looking at where your event's going to be, you can ask, please no single-use plastics on site. We don't want no linens on the tables. We want plant-based menus. You want to show that the menus are local products and you're sourcing from local vendors. No sterno or oil candles. These are huge and hard to waste. And then do you use products that are compostable or recyclable? These are things that we can actually build in. And when you're doing your RFPs, which is a request for proposal, so you're trying to get bids from different venues, you can ask them to include what the cost would be to include these things if they were to host your event. So we can actually ask for them and require them as part of our contract. So a lot of big takeaways here. We've learned a lot. Like I said, much of this can still be utilized and used in 2021. Like I said, there's a couple things we're moving a little backwards on. Of course, with the new health guidelines, we're going to see a lot more of the single wrapped and single used products when it comes to food and beverage especially, but there is a way to still become sustainable even with these restrictions. So kind of bottom line, super important, there's no planet B, and a change in our industry, being an event professional for 8 years, is really overdue. And there's a ton of resources out there, so let's learn them all. We are a consumer facing event. Like event planning more or less is a customer service industry. We're serving a greater good in an attendee base. So show these people, whether it's 50 people or 13,000, what we can do and how we can be more eventually friendly within the event world. Let's make changes in our events and how we run our events, send example to our peers, everyone else in the industry. We're not just working with other event planners, we're working with everyone in the travel and hospitality industry, hotels, convention centers, airlines. Let's make this happen. It really is a group effort. And I think we can really go a long way when it comes to sustainability. So if we can do all this and work together, we can be the change we wish to see.
Awesome. Brooke, thank you so much. This was such a fun Tom Talks. We're all excited to get back to events. We're so excited to get back to conferences. And, the hard thing that we all have to realize that during this pandemic is we may have had to put some sustainability movements on hold, and that's okay. They're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Yes, this year we might have to prioritize our health and use single wrapped plastic utensils.
Yeah.
In 2022, it might be better. I'm so happy to hear that you guys are implementing these changes because it is so fun. Everybody loves events. Everybody loves conferences.
Yeah.
Why not make the world a better place while doing something we love. So thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. I'm happy to be here. I think it's such an important topic, and what you guys are doing is so important, and getting these kind of messages out there. And, it's something you don't really think about, that sustainability and event planning can actually really go hand in hand, but it really shows that all industries can have a green factor to them. So we're just excited to bring people back again together and do it safely and still try and keep it green and do the best we can.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. No problem.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me.